Hello, BookTube. For you comic book fans out there, I wanted to do a quick video on my comic book experience this week because it's been pretty good. I just wanted to go through it just briefly. The first being Superman. This is a Black Dawn. This is a series that the writers are doing about Superman's son, young Jonathan, who has fragmentary and very weak superpowers when in the previous issue Batman and his son Damian come to the Kent farm, and Batman informs Clark Kent that in fact his son should be much more powerful than he is, much more powerful in fact than Clark Kent himself is, and that something is stopping those powers from developing. And it turns out there's a nefarious thing that is stopping those powers from developing. I don't know that I agree with that premise. Young John Kent is half Kryptonian and half human. And Kryptonian superpowers, when they're under a yellow sun on weak gravity, are derived from Kryptonian physiology. So a hybrid Kryptonian human would not be more powerful than a full-blooded Kryptonian who's an adult. And I don't really get that, and I worry, because I think the storyline of a young Superboy who doesn't have a lot of superpowers and is still learning how to use them is infinitely more interesting than a storyline in which Superboy is vastly more powerful than his father, and thereby, by extension, any other character in the DC universe. That's far more boring. We've been down that road before, 10, 15 years ago, when super cool writers decided that in the post-crisis DC universe, where there was no Supergirl, where Superman was the only survivor of the planet Krypton, they would break that rule and have Supergirl show up on Earth. And when she gets there, she's much more powerful than Superman. And it was kind of dumb. It's kind of boring. It's nothing I ever understood. Even with the original incarnation of Supergirl, when decades and decades ago, when she first appears, she comes to Earth and gains superpowers because of Earth's low gravity and Earth's yellow sun. Fine. Okay, great. But in those early years, 50, 60 years ago, she had the same superpowers as Superman, to the same degree as Superman. When, no, no, that's not actually how it works. You put two of these aliens who gain superpowers for the same reasons in the same environment, they gain their superpowers, the table is leveled between them, and all of a sudden you have a grown man and a 13-year-old girl. They aren't the same in terms of power. They both might have superpowers, but they don't have the same level of superpowers. So that's what's going on in the world of Superman, is that we're about to find out what this thing is, what has been holding back little Superboy. And I'm hoping the writers don't ruin it. But in terms of hoping the writers don't ruin things, oh my god, that applies 10 times more to our next issue, which is Batman. That is Batman and the Flash, and they are holding up a smiley face button with blood on it. And those of you who are comic book fans of long standing will know exactly what that means. That is the signature of the Watchmen, the epic graphic novel, the epic miniseries and graphic novel by Alan Moore and Dave Gibbons from a long time ago, in which various analogs of certain superheroes. It wasn't Marvel or DC. It was other characters. We see them in the real world, and we see the adventures that they go through, and it's horrifying and riveting. And it should never have had any kind of sequel. It shouldn't be part of the DC universe. There should never have been before Watchmen or anything like that. And in the end of that storyline, one of the central characters, Dr. Manhattan, who is an energy being who is gradually losing touch with what it means to be human, decides that he's had enough of Earth and he's going to go elsewhere. He's virtually all-powerful. So he does. And there's a godlike being evoked in these issues. And you've got the bloodied smiley face button. It seems to indicate that the writers are going to make a story in which the New 52, the reboot of DC that changed our happy, godlike heroes into miserable, griping, grim avatars of themselves, that the villain behind that change is going to be Dr. Manhattan, who for some reason is mucking around with one reality superheroes. And I'm worried, BookTube, I'm worried that is going to ruin not only Watchmen, but also the DC universe. I mean, what is the end result of a plot line like that? Batman and the Flash discover that Dr. Manhattan is, what, on Mars, pulling the strings of all reality and making the superheroes different than what they were before, and then what? They punch him out? There's no way for a plot like that to work all the way to the end, which is my problem with superhero comics and big event storylines like this, just in general, is that writers nowadays are wedded to the idea of launching off on plot lines that cannot end except by trickery, that cannot end in any one way except by trickery. Marvel's Civil War plotline, not just the second one, but the first one, is a perfect example of that. The federal government decides that superheroes and supervillains acting without any kind of legal supervision, creating huge amounts of property damage and loss of life, is too much of a threat, and institutes legislation making it illegal to do any kind of superpowered activity without government permission. In exactly the same way that it's illegal for you to drive an unlicensed car or fly an unlicensed jumbo jet. No matter whether you can do it or not, it's illegal for you to do it because it's a danger to other people. You can't make a storyline like that, and much less have superheroes line up on either side of it without fudging it in the end. There's no way to do it because you can't back off from that. A government, any government, would stick with the legislation. They wouldn't care if Captain America and Iron Man decided to be friends at the end. The legislation would stay in place. Once you do that, you can't undo it. And the same thing, I'm worried that the same thing will be true here, although this issue was fantastic. But this is promised to be a 4-issue series in which we learn the whole idea that the writer has in mind. I worry about its execution. Let's put it that way. But in terms of execution, oh my, the next thing was perfect, and it has been for quite some time. It's Astro City. It's neither Marvel nor DC. It's Kurt Busiek and Brent Anderson, the writer and artist, doing a loving. This is 100 issues now. An absolutely loving and optimistic and upbeat homage to the comic book world, with their own creations, their own heroes and villains, and the eponymous city, Astro City, where it all takes place. And every issue is a standalone. They're all in the same mythos of Astro City, but every issue stands alone, and every issue is just incredible. And this one stars a superhero called the Gentleman, who's been appearing almost since the first issue of Astro City. He's tall and impeccably well-mannered. He wears a tuxedo and a carnation in the buttonhole. He looks like Fred McMurray. So I automatically assumed from the beginning, and I think a lot of people did too, that he was Astro City's answer to Captain Marvel. Just this squeaky clean, somewhat adolescent, perfect, all-powerful superhero. Sort of, the counterbalance to Superman, which in this series is a character called the Samaritan. But the great thing about Astro City is that we get all this stuff thrown at us, and we always have. But Busiek takes his sweet time explaining any of it. And this is the first, and believe it or not, after all these years, this is the first time we've had an explanation of who or what the Gentleman is. This is, well, for want of a better word, his origin issue. And it's incredibly touching. Just every issue gives you all sorts of parallels that you expect and throws in some twists that you didn't expect. And I just love it. In the Marvel and DC universes, Marvel I can take or leave. DC I have loved from the very beginning. Their creativity, their innovation, even when they frequently make wrong steps in terms of narrative. The New 52 was their continuity reboot was entirely a wrong step. I have a suspicion that a lot of the stuff they're doing with the Watchmen here and rejiggering with the reboot of the reboot is also a bad idea. And of course, DC is also responsible right now for the mother of all bad decisions. They have no Legion of Superhero comics. There's no Legion of Superhero comic every month. That's insane. It's the most loyal and fanatical fan base in all of comicdom, and they don't have a comic book of their own. That drives me nuts. But when it comes to knowing that I'm going to enjoy every issue, Astro City is just it's where I go. And speaking of the Legion, we'll wrap up for now because I don't want this to be too long. I know a lot of you aren't interested in comics, but speaking of the Legion, a graphic novel came out that collects Legionnaires from the 1990s. This is by Tom McGraw and a bunch of great writers, and it tells the story of the Legion from the beginning. It retells their origin from the beginning. And the Legion made its first appearance in 1958, and has been jumping around and getting its own comics and losing its own comics that whole time, and building a fan base that knows everything about it and is fanatically loyal, including yours truly. I can tell you every single little detail that you want to know about every single character in the Legion. But this series from the 90s sort of patiently, reverentially, but firmly ignores the fact that the whole thing started in 1958 and instead gives us the story of the Legion right from the beginning, with three characters, none of whom are from Earth. There's Irma Ardeen from Saturn's moon Titan. There's Garth Rance from the agricultural planet of Wynath, and there's Brock Kryn from Braal. And Rock and Irma and Garth are all on a shuttle on which another passenger is also R.J. Brand, the richest man in the galaxy. And there's an attempt on his life. And unbeknownst to him and unbeknownst to his would-be assassins, these three characters have superpowers. Rock Kryn is from Braal. On Braal, all the inhabitants have magnetic abilities, the ability to manipulate metals. Garth Rance and his sister and his brother were all part of a freak accident that gave them lightning-wielding abilities. And Irma Ardeen is a telepath on Saturn's moon Titan. All the citizens are telepaths. She's just a really strong one. They're all on Earth for their own reasons, but when they see this crime about to happen, they leap into action together. And R.J. Brand, who's got reasons of his own, decides to finance the formation of a super team, the first one to appear since the semi-mythical Justice League 1,000 years ago, because this takes place in the 31st century. So memories of the Justice League are vague and fragmented. But R.J. Brand thinks that kind of thing can bring together the whole of the Federation of Planets. If there's a team that embodies multi-planetary dreams and aspirations and simple heroism. So he gives them costumes and a headquarters. They take on code names, Cosmic Boy, Saturn Girl, and Lightning Lad. And they begin recruiting other members from other planets in the United Federation of Planets and start having adventures. And this takes off right at the beginning in that first shuttlecraft and moves on through the awkward and stumbling beginnings of the team. And if DC Comics is smart, what they would do now in their rebirth, their new 52 continuity, would be to do the exact same thing. No matter how many times it's been done before, it's still completely valid. Do the exact same thing. The quintessential story of the origin of the Legion of Superheroes, those three teenagers and that rich old man. Start off with that, with Legion of Superheroes #1, and move on from there. I guarantee them, if they did that, without any weird hijinks, without any retconning of any kind, start off with the basics and move forward, I guarantee the book would sell enough to make a monthly title. I guarantee that it would. If they did it tomorrow, it would work. Do that. Start off that way. They haven't done it. They don't show any signs of doing it. But at least DC is rectifying what was for a long time a weird blind spot. At least they're starting up the machinery of reprinting the Legion, which has a vast and wonderful history of issues that are not reprinted. So you've got this, and then later on this summer, as you will see, I'm afraid I will subject you to it, there are a couple of other graphic novels of Legion coming out that I can't wait for, including one that's reprinting stuff that's never been reprinted before. So that's at least a step in the right direction. Now, the next thing DC needs to do is create a Legion of Superheroes comic book every month. And this is the way I think they should do it. Although I can't wait to dig into this. I haven't read some of these issues since they first came out, and the 1990s were a long time ago. And it's nice and thick too. It's all of them. It's the whole run of the thing. And there you go. That is sorry. I know it's not quite books, but we did end with a book, and it's just my comics this week, which got me all jazzed up. Now I'll go back to books. Thank you, book two.